as filmmakers and as artists, like if you think about magicians, they're not making magic for other magicians. They're making it for people who don't know the tricks. Your craft is most likely going to be seen by people who don't know what went into making it, don't know where to look, to find that one pixel that you really hate, because their eye is just not going to be the same. And that's definitely a huge step when you can understand that and be okay with a certain level of quality that just allows you to move forward with projects more.
Jacob J. Holliday is a crazy cool filmmaker. He favors storytelling conveyed through beautiful visuals, but he also has a deep understanding of CG compositing and 3D graphics. He knows the principles, quote unquote, behind a good image, and this really takes his stuff to the next level of pro. We'll get to chat about filmmaking, CG workflows, an artist's life, and also both get to share our stories. If you're new to Blender, it can be hard to find good content on YouTube that teaches you the A to Z of Blender. That's why freelance designer and Blender trainer Julien Deville created this Blender Complete training course for beginners. The course includes 33 hours of training, taking you through 15 chapters that will allow you to progressively learn the software. The main focus is to take a robot model from modeling all the way through animation to the final rendering. But apart from that, this course also teaches you about simulation, particles, sculpting, and more. So if you're ready to learn Blender, click the link in the description and use the code WFR15 to get 50% off your order. But hey, let's now get to the chat. A ton of useful resources in this one, so grab a coffee, sit back and enjoy the chat. Let's roll.
Sweet. Yeah, it's kind of interesting. I've done some work shooting like documentaries and just other interviews, and I learned on one production we would just kind of be talking to the interviewee, and we would just hit record and we wouldn't even ever tell them, because it's so interesting when you're interviewing someone and you say like, okay, are we like recording now? If you'd like talking to the cameraman, hey, do you hit record? And then the person just like tenses up, It totally changes them for some reason. But yeah, just rolling into it is always a good way to go about it.
I didn't know that, but I can imagine that people will be like that.
Yeah.
I always.
Yeah. Another tip is, if you're interviewing someone, this is a very specific advice that probably doesn't apply to most people watching this. But after you finish the interview, keep rolling, because people will then, relax. And then that's when they say the good stuff. It's really interesting. It always
that's
happens.
Amazing.
Yeah. So you got to keep rolling, because the good stuff always comes after they think that you stopped recording. So it's before and after.
Wow,
so if you can kind of blur the lines, yeah, it helps.
Where did you actually pick up all this stuff?
So I worked at a studio about a year and a half ago is when I kind of left. But we were filming a documentary for about a year. And so that was really when I just had a lot of experience being in on those interview shoots and kind of learning what helps to make an interviewee more relaxed and kind of speak more easily and freely. So,
that's good stuff to learn. And it's hard to just pick up otherwise if you haven't tried it.
It's definitely a skill. Yeah, you just have to kind of do it, and it gets easier. But it's tricky. It's not as easy. It's not as easy as it sounds. Just talking to people on camera and getting a good soundbite. So,
well, that's the technical stuff. You can Google that and read books, but human interaction, that's the next level.
Right. Exactly. Yeah.
But hey, I was thinking, would you like to just tell a little bit about yourself, like what you are up to? Maybe tell parts of your story if you feel like there are parts you would like to share. I'm really curious because I personally don't know so much about everything. I just know I've just seen the stuff you've been doing, a lot of compositing, a lot of knowledge about colors and how to do it like the real way, and a lot of workflow knowledge as far as I can see.
Right.
But I'm really curious, like how did it all start?
Yeah, so I've been into kind of filmmaking for a long time. Kind of picked it up in middle school when my family won a free like flip camera. I don't know if you remember those, the little rectangular cameras. And so I just started, like a lot of kids, I think, just making YouTube videos and short skits. Freddie W was a huge inspiration, and got into After Effects and visual effects like that. But then it came time in high school to kind of choose what I wanted to do at college, what I wanted to study. And I was kind of torn because kind of in my mind, studying film in college, getting a film degree, it was something that, I didn't know if it would leave me with as many options as I wanted post-college, to kind of be flexible in what sort of job that I could take. And so very close up there with my passion for filmmaking has been, and still is, computer science. And so I was blessed to go to a really great high school with some great computer science classes, to kind of get me, experienced what it's like to program. And so that's what I decided to study in college was computer science. But all the while that I was studying, I was still keeping my feet wet in the film scene. I actually met a really good friend in college, and we started a video production company. And so we were creating like corporate videos all throughout college. And really all my free time was spent doing film related things. Not so much visual effects in college. It was really more, producing full videos for a lot of corporate clients. And so then coming out of college, I continued to run that business with my friend. And then I eventually transitioned to a studio where it was kind of a bigger studio than what my friend and I had built. And so it was exciting. We had more gear and more people to work with. And so that was a really cool time. That's when I was involved with the documentary I mentioned. We were filming a feature-length documentary for about a year and got to travel to some really cool places to do that. Wow. But as part of that studio, I really wanted to get more involved in commercial directing. I'm really into like short, bite-sized, shorter content rather than making feature films.
Yeah. And
so I started to kind of realize, though, while I was at the studio, that sort of work is very much a freelance dominated kind of production. A lot of people who are on commercial shoots are all freelancers. And so I was kind of working full time at a studio, and I decided to leave the studio just to see if freelancing would allow me more opportunities to work on commercial productions in my area. And then that was about at the time that the pandemic started. So it was really bad timing, of course. And so, stuck inside a lot. Productions were shut down and just not happening. So I wasn't getting that sort of experience that I wanted. And so finally, left with not a ton of work, I decided to kind of do what I've always been passionate about, which is visual effects. And I had tried to learn 3D and like CGI for a long time. I tried starting with Maya and was just banging my head against the wall trying to figure out. Yeah, it was very tricky.
Then you realize that software is made for like a big powerhouse with 100 artists working together.
Right.
Like, this doesn't feel optimal at all.
No, it's very capable, of course, but it was not very beginner friendly, to say the least.
No.
So I had tried that and had kind of poked around in Blender a little bit. But now I had the opportunity to actually sit down and really like bury myself in the information. Because I don't know if you've had this experience, but like when you're learning a technical program like Blender, it's so like, especially starting out, it's very easy to learn something and then forget it like 10 times.
Yeah. Yeah.
before, yep.
And suddenly it sticks.
Yep. Yeah. And suddenly, yeah, after you do it the 10th time and you repeat it enough, it sticks in your brain and you start to develop that like muscle memory.
I feel like it's totally like that with shortcuts. I have to check the shortcuts every single time for a new shortcut. And then after the 10th time or whatever, then it's in my hands. And then if people ask me what the shortcut is, I can't tell them, but I know like my fingers press it automatically. That's when I know, okay, now it's in there.
Yep. You're not even thinking about it. So finally I was able to get to a point where I was, just kind of understood Blender and wasn't forgetting the things that I was learning, and I could actually make some forward progress. And I've always been the type of learner that learns best by teaching others, because it really, tests my knowledge of a subject. And so that's when I decided to start making YouTube tutorials. So I started the channel, InLightVFX is the name of it. And it was just kind of really, I didn't see a lot of videos on YouTube about how to do visual effects with Blender. And so kind of spent a lot of time figuring out the workflow and what it looked like. And it's been a lot of fun ever since. And the Blender community, like I know you've said in other episodes, it's just awesome. And that's been something I didn't expect going into it, but probably my favorite part of the past year has just been seeing, the growth and the talent and just so many nice people to kind of work alongside and even just support each other is super awesome. So for sure. And I feel like you see even more people now who are already in the industry going back and finding Blender and like joining this ship, So instead of everybody coming in being beginners and like beginners in the field, not necessarily the software, they are professionals who already know all the technical stuff, but they just have to find out how to use Blender. I think that really pushes the, the entire level of the Blender artwork you see way up, like. Absolutely. And it really seems like, who was I talking to? I forget the name of his channel, but, Blender is really getting into that point where they're recognizing the needs of like larger scale productions. With stuff like USD and, I don't personally know all the needs of a larger scale production. I just hear that people say that.
No, for sure. And I think for a long time, Blender has been missing that. Like you say, USD is one of the things. And I think if Blender get that now, they are already in front of a lot of the other big softwares out there. I think it's only Houdini who has really, or that's the only software package that has really gotten USD to work yet. But I still feel like there are a lot of ways or a lot of things that Blender is lacking compared to a package like Cinema 4D for motion design, for instance. But I'm sure that Blender will get there with all the people just, like developing stuff and giving ideas, making ideas and sharing.
The community always seems to find a way around like the limitations. And I think that's one of the fun things too, is finding ways to do things with Blender. Like doing it the hard way can be a lot of fun to figure out. Sometimes. Sometimes.
And then when you hit the wall where Blender just crashes, or you realize, wait, if I have this many polygons, like Blender is just not gonna handle that like another software would.
That's true.
But like the hacky methods that you can use in Blender, they're so cool, because in Cinema 4D, it feels like, or now I have mainly experience with Cinema 4D and Blender. In Cinema 4D, it's like, it's so much of, you can do this, and then that's it. And then if you try to plug systems together, it's like, no, it doesn't work.
Interesting. Huh.
Where, Houdini is the polar opposite, being totally open, and Blender is somewhere there in the middle. So at least that's how I see it.
Do you use Blender or Cinema 4D more?
For professional work, I use Cinema 4D because that's just the people I work together with. They use C4D. But even there, I jump into Blender sometimes when I'm like, oh man, I need to delete these vertices on all these objects. And there's a one-click solution in Blender, And in Cinema 4D, you have to select every single one. So just like export FBX, jump into Blender, fix it, and FBX back into Cinema 4D. So it depends a lot on what I need to get done.
Okay.
But that's how it is for me, at least. But when did you then pick up Blender? Because actually, from looking at your stuff, I thought that you were one of the people who have known Blender for 10 years or something.
Yeah.
Because you have such you're teaching people something that nobody's teaching. Like you said, VFX in Blender is not something people are teaching, but I guess your knowledge of filmmaking was like the foundation. Then you just need to figure out how to use Blender to do it.
Right. Oh, sorry. I just heard. Okay, we're good.
Okay.
I'm hearing voices now. This is what Blender does to me. No. So I started using Blender probably wow, actually that's a lot longer ago than I thought. Maybe like 4 years ago. But there was a big gap when I was working at that studio doing the documentary stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I really I never started using it heavily until about just over a year ago.
Wow, okay.
But like I said, growing up, I had been really heavy into After Effects.
Yeah.
So I feel like I was at a pretty good place with like 2D visual effects and kind of developing an eye for visual effects and compositing and what looks real. And so I think some of those things transferred over a little bit. I had been banging my head against the wall on some of the more technical issues. It really was like a moment of breakthrough when I figured out what the heck render passes were and because that was, and this is the thing that you don't get on social media when people are posting the final work.
Exactly.
You don't see the hours that went into figuring out how to do something. But yeah, I had just been working for literally years to figure out, and not stop of course, but always wondering how the heck do you render out a shadow and composite it onto stuff that sounds easy to me now, but was really tricky for me to figure out, especially in Maya land, which we've already
I can imagine.
Yeah,
that's like
so.
I've had more experience with CDS Max than V-Ray, but even that is, as far as I know, you have to have a plugin to be able to render different elements or different render passes from that package, which sounds ridiculous. But it's very interesting you say this, because I remember at the first studio job I got, I had no idea you could render out passes. I didn't even understand what they were. All I did was to do my stuff in Blender, then click render, and then I got a PNG sequence. That's it. 8-bit.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't know that you could do 16-bit by then, or at that time.
Sure.
And then I got in there. They were like, can you give us this pass? And I was like, what is a pass? And they had compositors and everything, and they were trying to comp my sRGB 8-bit PNGs, and they were like, this wouldn't work. And I was like, okay.
Yeah.
So I mean, you really after that I got to learn about it, and it's like opening a whole new world. You realize how much stuff can be done after you click the render button.
Right. Wow. You were just thrust into the fire though with that.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
Totally.
On the job. That would kind of intimidate me a little bit to figure out a concept like that in the studio setting. But sounds like you had some nice people to help guide you there as well.
They were very nice. And very it was a studio they just switched from Maya to Blender. So the entire pipeline was kind of thrown out the door, and then had to build something entirely new. So because of that, everything was a bit like, okay, now we have to figure out stuff. So there was a little period there of getting up to speed for everybody, and also figuring out how to manage everything in Blender.
So is that are you still working at that same studio?
No, that was back in 2018. Since then, I've been at 2 different other studios, and now I'm working as a freelancer. And working.
Whoa. Rewind. I want the full story before you.
The full story.
Yeah. I need the full timeline. Yeah.
Okay. So, I think back in 2012, I discovered Blender, and I was like, oh man, or it was actually my friend who discovered it. He was like, we gotta learn this. And he was looking at all these tutorials. And then after a couple of months, he was like, nah, it's not for me. And I kept going. And then, you just get like caught up in it, or I did, in this all like everything 3D, and I was just doing it all the time whenever I could fit in some hours next to school. And then when I was out of school, I had a gap year where I was just trying to figure out what to do. I was like a part-time science teacher at a small school. And then I was doing a lot of CG on the side and a few freelance projects. Just for very small clients. And then after that, I started growing my YouTube channel by then. And then I got in contact with a German studio. And I'm originally from Denmark. And I got a job there. They asked if I wanted a job because they saw that I was using Blender, and they were switching over to Blender. And that was basically how it got started. So I like took the train to Germany and was like, okay, here I am. How do I do this? I've never been at a studio before.
Wow,
so that
crazy.
was really like trial by fire.
Yeah.
Where I figured out that there was something called compositing, and they also asked, oh, so what is your usual workflow? And I was like, workflow? What is that? And
I just make pretty pictures. Yeah.
I just make pretty pictures. I mean, put in some lights.
I can email you the output.
Exactly. You can download it from YouTube and put it in the video.
Right.
No. And there I was working for a bit less than a year, just learning a ton of stuff. Then I went to Brazil for 3 months to travel, to just try that out. So it was like a lot of different places. And then I was back in Denmark for 2 years, working at 2 companies there, doing more like motion design stuff. So the first company was animation, and we were doing a lot of technical product launches for like, what's it called? Washing machines, dishwashers, stuff like that. So it was really cool. Because it was kind of like close to the car world in some sense, even though it's much more boring. Then it's like the same. It's the hard surface.
You have circular shapes and lots of motion.
Shapes,
yeah.
A lot of reflections. We were joking, we had the Siemens reflection, which was like one light gradient that went like across the screen, and that always had to be there in every single shot. That was the Siemens reflection.
It's like the eye light that you always want in the character's eyes.
Exactly. It's totally like that. And the client was like, yeah, we want that. Okay, great. You'll get that.
What did you just place a light right there once you had your camera angle figured out, or just parent the light to it or something?
Yeah, no, actually I just put a light in front, like a big area, not an area light, but just a plane, an emitter. And then with a gradient on it, and I was like, okay, that's fine. So I mean, cool. So that was a lot of fun. So that's basically the like my story in a brief way. And then after that, I got to Denmark, and I got to. You also mentioned we were speaking a bit or chatting a bit via email, and you also talked about that you were very interested in the storytelling part, and that was also something that I got to try out more when I got back to Denmark, because in Germany, it was very much just, okay, we have this script, just produce these shots, make some nice lighting, and just do whatever it says in the script. Whereas in Denmark, it was more motion design I got into, where it's about telling the story or conveying the feeling of the product, and kind of being the director as well. So that was really interesting for me. And like I said, that's also something that you would like to get more into, or that you want to push more for in the entire Blender community.
Right. Right. Yeah. Well, that's really cool. So were you like essentially determining like the camera angles and stuff like that for the different CG work that you were doing in Denmark?
Yeah, it was very much like, instead of having a big client who already had an idea about what they wanted, it was just a lot of robotics companies. They were like, we need a campaign, we need some social media stuff. How can we do this? And then it was just open. We were 3 guys at the first company, so we just started brainstorming and being like, okay, what if we can tell the story by showing these different robots, and they could switch places like dynamically in the middle of shots, and we could do like split screens, and later down the line it became more abstract. So we tried to always find analogies for, okay, what kind of motion would convey the feeling of this being easy, or if we had to show how easy it is to plug this tool onto the robot, or put this tool onto the robot and stuff like that.
Sure.
So that was basically the stuff.
Yeah.
But it was a lot of fun to be able to do those things, and because then you're not just a technical guy, but you're also the creative person.
Right. Right. It's fun. I think that's where, another level of separating someone's work is when they're really thinking about the meaning behind the image and how to bring that out using all the tools that they have, from color to lighting, composition. That's one of the reasons I love Chris's blog. Hopefully you'll link that below.
Yeah.
Because he just talks about, all those things that I don't think, the theories of how we see images that aren't in our conscious brains, but they're, subconsciously affecting how we take in information and what we think of an image and how we feel about an image. So I think when you can start to make more purposeful decisions about your work with that sort of thinking, it can go a long way in even guiding you towards making a decision of how do I light this shot, or with all the infinite camera angles that I could use here, how do I choose one? And it can,
exactly.
Those rules can help you narrow down like how you create your work. So they're good guidelines, I think, to know about in case you're just kind of unsure about what colors or choices like that to make.
And I think you hear that a lot from people who are, well, like you have the knowledge from also film beforehand, because the people who jump straight into 3D, and myself included, didn't know all these things. I was just trying out different things. But if you have to place the light in any possible position before you find the one that works the best, it will take a very long time for you to make a film. But if you know, okay, I should basically never light a car from like, if the camera's here, you should never put the light here because it will never look good. So you already have that like excluded, and then you have like a few options, and okay, if I have a rim light here, it will separate from the background, and all these theory, like
backlight everything.
Backlight everything.
That's the answer.
Yeah. Well, that's true too.
Right.
Backlight everything. So that really has a lot of value.
Yeah. Definitely.
And I was thinking, we were just chatting about it, that this thing with passion and job, where you hear from a lot of people that, or I heard in the beginning, they kept telling me like, oh, but when you get a job doing this, then you won't like it as much. Then it will be like everyday stuff. And I don't know. For me, it hasn't gotten to that point yet. Let's see if that happens. And also this entire idea with the starving artist, which is something you hear again and again. Mm-hmm. Has that been something that made you? Was that the reason why you mentioned in the beginning that you picked computer science rather than filmmaking?
Yeah, I think it's definitely, computer science has always, to me, kind of, in my mind, provided a nice safety net. And I think, it's always made it easier for me to like take risks, doing stuff like art related that might not pay super comparably to a more technical, well, I shouldn't say a more technical, because a lot of, if anything, a lot of CG is more technical than computer science jobs, depending on what you're doing. But you get the point. So it's been a good peace of mind to have that degree, and it comes into visual effects so much. Computer science does. Yeah. With very writing add-ons for Blender to help make a more straightforward pipeline. I mean, if you look at Houdini, it's just a bunch of computer science. Yeah.
And it's also interesting in the beginning, like every artist was had a computer science degree. Otherwise you wouldn't be able to figure all this out.
Right. Yeah. Like, I don't know if you've read the book, Creativity Incorporated by Ed Catmull.
It's on my list. It's on my list. A lot of people have been recommending that I read it.
You need to read it. It's super good, and he's a very, a very. Let's see. The right brain is, I forget which one's the math side of your brain.
I honestly don't remember.
I think it might be left. Okay, someone's gonna have to.
Let me check. Truth about left, right brain. The left is for math and the right is more towards the art, according to some random article on Google.
Gotcha. Well, he probably has both sides because he's such a smart dude, and as one of the leaders at Pixar, you probably have to have a lot of both. But yeah, it's really interesting to hear about how he started on the technical side of math and science, and like you said, just so many brilliant minds going into how to make images with the computer. So
yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
And the day that I realized that our subdivision surface model is actually named Cadmill Clark because of him, I was like,
yeah.
It's like everything we do now and that we live by doing, or earn our money by doing, is based on both these great artists, but also these even greater almost software developers who could figure all these things out. Like, and even today, I mean, there's been so many different techniques thought up and developed to get us where we are. Like, just the basic buttons that we have in Blender and we take totally for granted. Like ambient occlusion, which is already outdated, took a long time to even think of, I can imagine.
Yeah. It's insane.
Yeah.
But I think, it's interesting what you said about this. You working at a studio didn't really take away a lot of your enjoyment of what you were doing. I've not having worked at a CG or a studio that does visual effects before. I've always wondered what my experience would be like. Did you feel like your learning really accelerated once you were in the studio setting?
I think, I really think so. For me, it has always been like a rush, or not a rush, but a trip to find the place, a journey to find a place where I can learn the most. And the first year at that studio, I learned so much, and I felt like after that I had kind of got to a point. Okay, now I would like to move forward and try something else, because that was not what I could feel that was not what I wanted to do forever. And then also because of my trip and everything, then it was a good time to try something else. And the same when I was working more in the motion design field, that was where I picked up a lot of things. Like, you realize the more people you get to talk to, the more people who influence you, the more different things you learn. Like, every single person has their own thing, and you're like, wow, I never thought about that. Like, watching your ACES tutorials, I was like, wow, this stuff is really important. And that made me kind of really push for it and be like, okay, I really got to learn this stuff. And then you kind of pick that up and you can use that. And I hope the same way the stuff that I'm putting out there, people can like get and take a little bit from that. So I think that is really my goal, always trying to find different places where I can learn something and prioritize that higher than the pay, basically. Because you mentioned before that you were doing like the better paying software development, but I'm curious, are you also working as a freelancer in relation to software development, or is that more like as a safety net that you have software development?
No, I'm not doing anything in regards to software development right now. I don't know what I said.
Or maybe I misunderstood
it. Well, I've recently been writing some really basic like scripts in Blender. But yeah, I guess it's always been at the back of my mind, like like what you were saying, the value of income and income level. It's easy to want more money. I think that's just like a very basic primal instinct that we all have.
That's true.
But so for that reason, I've always kind of been tempted to leave what I'm most passionate about, film and visual effects, and just study and go work at a tech company and program, make some better money, and then after a couple of years leave and use that money to make films. And maybe I'll still do that. I don't know. But I think there is a lot of value in just kind of working on your craft, and it especially helps. And this is the topic I know you had, we were talking about, was what you have to give up to kind of dedicate yourself to learning CG and software like Blender. And yeah, I think there's a lot of sacrifices that you have to make. Whenever you dedicate yourself to anything, whether it be the pursuit of a partner, or the pursuit of learning some software, or whether money is the thing that's the highest pursuit, I think you're going to have to give up a part of yourself, and you're going to have to make sacrifices for that thing. But I think, so it takes a lot of delayed gratification is something I think about a lot. Like, you put in the work and you don't see results for
that's so
a
accurate.
long time.
Yeah.
And that's one of the most challenging things, is because not only are you not getting that satisfaction of the work you're putting in, but you're also failing a lot. And so you're getting the negative response of just making awful, renders. Like, I've been learning procedural materials lately, and have just made some atrocious materials that look nothing like I would want them to. And it's really hard. Like, in those moments, I feel like just the worst CG artist that's ever out there. And I forget about the things that I do know and the things I have learned. And my brain just focuses on that one thing. And it's just like, oh man, it's tough to kind of work through those moments and push past them. It's really, really tricky. And that's where I give credit to a higher power, because it's like, oh my gosh, it's a very tough process to kind of get to where you want to be, and then you get there and you want to be somewhere else still.
Exactly. I think it's like that with almost everything. No. It was really interesting. I just wanted to add, because I think that this is so true for a lot of different things. Now I know that you have a Patreon, you have YouTube, you are doing some really good quality tutorials there, which I really appreciate, because I feel like sometimes you see the Blender community being focused very much on this quick stuff, which is like the shiny sphere, rendering the shiny sphere. Which looks cool, but it doesn't push you personally. It doesn't push your skills, but it gives you a lot of likes on Instagram. That's great. And the same with the tutorials. The stuff that's easy to follow, the Iron Huber tutorials that are really funny, and some, like, they are really informative as well. But those are not the ones that you should watch to really get a deep understanding of something. That's not. I think the stuff you learn per minute there would not be the same, or would not stick as well, at least, than the videos you do, because it's much more in depth and there's really some quality in there. But what I just wanted to say was that it's like this that you talked about. Now I lost track of it.
I threw a lot of things. I was kind of rambling there, so I apologize.
No, but it was really good. It was really good. But I just think that there is a lot to, like, pushing yourself to keep doing the hard work is really important. The delayed gratification, or seeing the results later down the line, it just gives you so much more by then. And that's the same that I'm trying to do with also the work, always trying to focus on where can I learn the most, not necessarily where can I earn the most money, or where can I get the most likes. Because like you said, it's always like you think that, okay, what I see out there is where I want to go. In the beginning, I thought when I got to a studio and could earn money doing this, then I'm like life complete, happy, finalized, end of the game, you won melody, but no, like there's always something else. And even just with doing YouTube, I think it's the same thing, at least for me, that you always want to go further, and even just the numbers that you see there, all the statistics, you always want to get more. Like it just goes to your mind a little bit, or to your brain. But yeah, I think that is also what pushes you to become that much better. That is like the endless, what's it called? Like the endless journey.
Treadmill,
the treadmill.
The hedonic treadmill. Yeah.
Journey a treadmill. I mean, yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think that's a good point. And I think that's why for me, I try to, when thinking about like, I think every artist has, every person has a way that they view themselves, like a self-esteem, right? And for me, I try even beyond like putting my worth and my identity in YouTube statistics.
Yeah.
Even beyond like putting that in my creative work, I try to, I think really to survive and to push through those tough times of learning how to be a good artist. I don't think your value can necessarily be in art because you're going to fail so much that it's just going to be so much of a emotional roller coaster. And it already is because, but I do think that your value has to be in something outside of the art because it's not a very stable place to put one's value. So
that's for sure. I think that's something that is really a learning process in the beginning to understand that. And I mean for everything in life, I suppose it is like that. Not just art, but we just meet it, or we just experience it very upfront in art, doing this stuff.
Absolutely.
But I think that it's really like going for it and doing this, making this sacrifice and making renders that they do not look as good as the ones you previously made. And then, I don't know, you can maybe not post them, but at least realizing that when you fail or when you make renders that aren't good, that's a learning process, because then you know what not to do next time. And it is really like that, you know? Then taking a look at it and comparing, that's when you can see, wait, I made this mistake. If you just keep making the shiny spheres, you will be very good at shiny spheres, but you will not push yourself so much.
Well, that's one thing I've been thinking about a lot, is like, at what point, because if you think about successful industries and companies, a lot of big corporations that make a lot of money do it by doing the same thing over and over.
Yeah.
And so I've thought about that in my own journey as like an artist. I always, like you, really want to learn more and grow. But sometimes I wonder if I should, take a pause from trying to cram new information in my head and kind of focus on the things that I do know and really market those skills. And I don't know if that makes sense, but yeah, just
it does.
At what point do you do the same thing that you already know again and again? That's kind of been a hard line for me to draw. And I feel like I've always been on the side of, I can't do this project because I already know how to do this. When in reality, if I did it, I would probably just improve. I would still improve somehow.
Yeah.
So I don't know if you've experienced that.
I think so, and it's very interesting you say this, and I've been thinking the same a lot of times. But I've always experienced, when I then did a project that I was like, okay, this is going to be an easy one, I always ran into a challenge, because throughout the process I changed, the scope. Because then I was like, I saw this new tool and I was like, wow, it could be really cool, and then I could add this. And then I'm there again where I'm like, wait, no, I don't know how to do this. I thought that now I had a pipeline, now I knew exactly which buttons to press, and I just had to produce it. But
yeah,
I think that's the thing with art. You just gotta you gotta enjoy that time, and sometimes allow yourself to really be in that exploration or experimental phase. and try those things out. That's at least how I see it.
Do you feel like with the studio work that you do, is it because like if I'm making a YouTube video and if you're making a passion project, you can spend as much time exploring different workflows as you want. Obviously with paid work and studio work, you're on a deadline more of.
Yeah.
Do you feel like that helps your process, or do you sometimes wish you had more time to explore and experiment?
It's interesting because a lot of people say this, right? You hear this, you should make deadlines even in your personal projects because that makes you finish it. But I really feel like not having the deadlines and not having these limitations just allows you to explore, and it allows you to make those new things, because otherwise you can very easily with client projects kind of settle and be like, okay, this is good enough. We'll just ship it, because the fact is just that I think both of like every artist, we see more details than the client would see. So even though a lot of the client projects I'm making, I'm not happy with, I want to spend much more time on it. And I guess you always see the mistakes you made, and other people might not notice them.
But the client would be happy with it.
The client would be happy. And I think
they just have a different eye. Yeah.
Exactly. And that's also something I've been told of the studios. Like, you don't have to get it to 100%. Sometimes 99 is plenty, because the last 1% you do might take 40% of the time. At the end of the day, if it's just one pixel that you want to be a little more gray, and then you need to change the subsurface scattering of this material to be a little more, don't worry about it. It's one pixel.
Yeah.
So I think this is also something you got to learn.
Yeah, it reminds me of a quote. I don't know who said it, but they're referring to. They said, as filmmakers and as artists, like if you think about magicians, they're not making magic for other magicians. They're making it for people who don't know the tricks.
That's true.
And so I think in the same way for, artists, your craft is most likely going to be seen by people who don't know what went into making it, don't know where to look, to find that one pixel that you really hate, because their eye is just not going to be the same. And I totally agree. I think that's definitely a huge step when you can understand that and be okay with a certain level of quality that just allows you to move forward with projects more.
Exactly. I think that is really important. I was also thinking, now it's a question I have with some of my friends. One of my friends, he's always joking that I should have a statement on this podcast, or it should be like, have a thing where if something was physically incorrect in the way that people were rendering something, or the shading, if they add an edge shader and that would technically break the calculation of the lights, or if you comp your stuff in sRGB instead of linear, then it's physically incorrect, and then that would be like physically correct, and he always tells me like, no, you don't have to worry so much about that. It just has to look good. And I'm like, no, but if you do it right, then it will be just that little bit better. And you just have to, it's about a workflow, right?
Physically correct.
Physically incorrect. Physically correct. Yeah. I'm curious, how is your take on that? For you, does it matter if you know that this material here has it's not the correct Fresnel, it has way too much reflection, but it looks good? Would you then rather try to fix the lighting to make it look correct, and then knowing this material has the physical properties? Or will you just say, I'll just mess up I'll just add a glossy node afterwards with an edge shader and then add a bit more glossy. That's fine.
Sure. Yeah, I think I'm more on the side of wanting everything to be physically correct. Team physically correct. Yeah, we have to keep a tally. I just want to see a tally mark grow on your wall with like two separate sides for the people you have on the podcast. But
it should totally be like that.
Yeah. I think, and it was kind of funny. People who listen to this will know like CG Matter. in his YouTube channel, but he commented on one of my ACEs video, and he was like, this is, a nice explanation of ACEs, but I would probably just add some contrast to the raw footage and
That's the
add in
perfect
my CG.
example.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there's definitely, and that works. And that's, again, back to the magic for magicians thing. There's stuff like that all through so many workflows that at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter. But I think it's also, there's so much that we do as artists that we know doesn't matter, but it's just fun.
Yeah.
It's fun to explore these concepts. I told you I was writing a short film, and there's, I don't need to format the script in a screenplay format with the right font, but that's like a cool thing to do. Like,
that you totally feel like
like
it's a Hollywood production. Yeah.
Right. It feels more legit.
Yeah.
And like things like a storyboard, it doesn't have to be super high quality, but it's fun to create those assets even when it's not totally necessary. So for me, the making things physically accurate is a fun thing. And for other people, it's not. I think it just depends on. Am I breaking up? Sorry. I hope.
I was breaking up a bit, but I could hear it was a little bit slow at some point, but everything got through.
Okay, perfect. I also have the audio and video running on my end, so
that's perfect.
We'll get the clean stuff. But anyway, yeah. So I definitely feel like for me, I enjoy the physically accurate route. I would be team physically accurate, but
cool.
I think the people who don't go that way are in a lot of ways very smart and probably do things a little bit quicker. But maybe they suffer in certain scenarios. I don't know.
It's like something that has been troubling me like a lot lately, because I started to work with a studio called Mundlik Studios here in Germany. They are based in Germany. I live in Germany again now, moving back and forth all the time.
Wow, that's crazy.
because of the girlfriend, she came here, and then I wanted to live here too, close to her.
Gotcha.
And they do amazing stuff. Like they do a lot of car stuff, and like those guys they have been in the game for such a long time and been working on the like. I'm a total fan. That's just how it is. And now I get to work together with them, so that's super cool.
That's so awesome.
And it's so interesting to see their workflow, because that is really it is physically correct to a certain extent. And then it's like when you get to that point where you're like, okay, now it's not viable anymore to keep it physically correct, or it doesn't make sense, then they break it. And that's something like, if you can add 2 car paint shaders together and then it looks better, why not do it? If the final pixels look better, you should do it. So that's something that like every time I see that, I'm like, but but I can just say that their stuff is just so much better than mine. So what can I say, right?
They're the proof. The proof is in the pudding.
The proof is in the pudding. But I think it's really interesting. I think it's something that's gonna be there for a long time. Like something that we're always gonna trying to weigh one against the other. Another thing is, for me, is also when I make a film or I make a project, then I tend to focus a lot on the workflow and thinking, okay, how can and I know you've also been working with this, how can I link the model from a separate file so I can shade it there? And if the client wants the logos changed, we can just swap the logo in that one robot, and then all our 10 shots with animations is updated there, and I don't have to go through and update it every single time. And these things are also something you realize for every single project you have to make it kind of custom. So you spend a long time in the beginning making this, and you just hope that it will pay off in the end, right? Because maybe everything will go right, and you will never have to change anything in the base file.
Yeah.
So I think this is like another thing.
Yeah, no, that's a great it's very similar. Like, are you gonna put the work in up front to automate the things that you think you might repeat a lot? Or are you just going to go through and brute force it all and click the same button 1,000 times? I've definitely experienced that recently, because like just trying to figure out how to write Blender scripts, I'm like, man, I invested a whole day trying to debug this script. Is it really worth it? Like,
Man,
I could have
know
done
that.
what I wanted. I could have rendered out. I had a file when I was making storyboards. I had like 26 scenes and I wanted to, change settings for all of them. And I was like, came to the end of the day, hadn't figured out the script. And I was like, I could have done this in 30 minutes.
Scenes. Yeah, exactly.
Right.
But the thing is, if you make a tool for it, next time you will have a one-click solution for solving that problem. If you run into the same problem again,
and you know how to make the tool,
and you know how to make the tool, I think that for me is enough proof that it's worth it to put in that time and make the tool, make the workflow, make the pipeline. But I experienced the same. I've done like very very little programming back in school, so I had the basics. So I made one plugin for Blender, which is because when you in Blender, when you have an object, if you have rotated the Suzanne head, like just a random rotation in the scene, and you want to flip her, then you press S, X, and try to drag it to the side. But then it kind of like, it almost flips, it scales down correctly, and then when it goes to when it starts to flip, then the rotation is messed up. And I don't know why it is like that, but that's just the way Blender works. In other softwares, it's like you just press -1 or you write -1 in the X scale, and then it flips. So this was always so annoying to me. So I ended up making an add-on, and the math behind it was something I could make in like 2 minutes. But I spent 3 days writing the add-on because then I had to figure out, but how do I make a pie menu? And then, oh man, this stuff messed up, and then I wanted it to automatically do this, and yeah. So I totally get that. But it's super fun though. It's super fun.
It is very fun and very gratifying to have a script work and just one click. Who cares about the 2 weeks it took to make it? It's one click now and it feels so good.
That's it. When you present it, it looks like it was easy to do.
Right. That's all that matters, right? Is the illusion.
Yeah, the magic trick. Well.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah.
But that is really awesome.
Are you so you're working at this studio in Germany now? Is that the only studio that you're at right now? Because I feel like you've mentioned so many studios.
Yeah, it's because the first studio was here in Germany. That was on location. The second one was a small studio. We were 3 people in Denmark, and that got bought by one of the biggest studios in Denmark, who are doing a lot of architectural visualization. They're like a 3ds Max V-Ray house. That was where I got to touch 3ds Max, and they bought this small company with the 3 of us who did motion design, and we're using Cinema 4D to kind of like expand their variety of videos they could do, basically, animations. So we were kind of like the small rebel group inside the bigger company, and we were like Cinema 4D, GPU rendering, and the other guys were 3ds Max, CPU, V-Ray, old school stuff. So we felt totally like those new kids has all the funny toys, all the fun toys. And then this studio I'm working with now, it's just remote, and it's like freelance basis. But I have a lot of collaboration with them, and they are super super nice people, and their projects are so cool because they have. One of the first talks I had with them, they were like, so what we want to do is just art. And they focus so much on that it has to be fun and it has to be creative. So that's what just makes it great to work with them.
That's awesome. And they do mainly automotive stuff?
Yeah, a lot of automotive and just other creative stuff as well. They are very, very broad when it comes to software as well. Some people use Houdini, some use Maya, some use Max, some use Blender, some use Cinema 4D. So it's actually all of them. Wow, that's awesome. A great variety to learn from there. Exactly. So it's really fun, and I feel like I learn a lot there.
That's sweet. So tell me about this, because obviously, anyone that's seen your work knows, first off, that you have some outstanding work, if I hadn't said that already. It looks amazing. But obviously you have a thing for cars. So what's the background with that? I think it's just like the thing. I always liked cars. My parents, they usually just said for my birthday when I was a kid, just give him anything that has a car in it and he will be happy. So I think that's the story. That's it. I mean, gotcha. Just always liked cars. And then
when I started doing Blender, I just wanted to rent a car, and it took 3-4 years before I could do that. But yeah.
Here you are making
Yeah.
Lamborghinis and whatnot. What's your dream car?
What my dream car is? That's the funny thing. It changes a lot. I don't have one specific dream car. I really like McLarens, and I also made 2 of them already in 3D. So that maybe points to that fact.
By the time that you can afford it, you'll be able to customize it all in 3D and just hand them the plans.
Exactly. It's very much like that. There is a guy named Kaisa, I think he's called. He makes a lot of cars on Instagram. I don't know if you've seen it.
I don't think so.
Like heavily modified 3D renders he was doing. He was working for EA Games on some Need for Speed stuff, and now he just basically got out there and made and makes real modification for cars instead. So
wow, that's sweet.
So that's some kind of a transition.
But
yeah.
What's his name on Instagram?
I think he's called Kaisa or Kaizo. Kyzo or ZA. Okay. It's Kaisa. But yeah, definitely check him out. He has some really cool stuff.
Yeah, I will. That sounds sweet.
So, but hey, that's now we're just about around an hour or something like that. So I don't want to take too much more of your time, but it was just super cool that you wanted to chat, and I really enjoyed it. I talked much more. Like, I think we were kind of both interviewee here, but I really enjoyed it. So.
Yeah, me too. This was super great, and definitely nice to hear more about your background and have the opportunity to finally chat.
Yeah, for sure. And likewise, it's super cool to hear how you started out doing film and have all that knowledge, because I mean, as long as you know how a camera works, you just have to find out how a 3D camera works to use Blender.
It is a helpful background to have, but I think it's also cool the other way around. You know, with Blender, people can learn how to use a camera before they ever have one.
That's true.
There's just not as many constraints, so maybe it's like we've said before. It's you can put the camera anywhere, but it's exciting to be able to learn different lighting concepts before you have access to that sort of gear, if you really do want to do the more physical production stuff. So
for sure, sure. I think that is so spot on, because maybe that's the problem with a lot of 3D software. When you add in an area light, it has a certain value, and that value is the default. So if people don't know which value to change it to, they will just leave it there. Same with the sun lamp in Blender. The default value of the sun lamp is way too low. So if you don't increase it, it's wrong. But 3D gives you all the possibility to make your own lights, but you have to know how to make them.
Right.
Like you said, if you're just placing lights anywhere in 3D, it doesn't make sense. But if you know the theory behind it, you can purposefully add your values and place your lights and cameras and so on. Yeah,
it's interesting. Have you ever done any actual film shoots with any cars or anything?
No, I have never been on a set, and I really wanted to. So that was also something I find really cool about your start, that you have been out there.
Yeah. Well, I feel like you know, just talking about Blender transferring to real life, I got to imagine if you were given the right gear, you could light a car to look really awesome, like in the real world, which I think would be a really, now that I think about it, that would be a sweet, even a great YouTube video just to see how those skills transfer. I mean, it'd be super different, right? But I think you'd find a lot of similarity if I, just get a softbox. Okay, this is my area light. Where would I put this in 3D? Exactly. Okay, now we're in the real world. I'll put this.
Oh, it takes a bit longer to move it. Okay, well,
it's heavier. I need to actually work out, so I don't, I'm moving more than my mouse.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, when you go from being a gaffer on set to being a 3D lighting artist, you gain a bit of weight.
Yeah, absolutely. But it's interesting because then you see people like Roger Deakins, great cinematographer. He's making the reverse move and doing cinematography for like Toy Story.
Wow, I didn't know that. He did that for the fourth? Or
I could be wrong, but I think I read that somewhere.
Wow.
That because he helped them. Oh, no, actually, I don't think it was him. But I think,
Okay.
I think he did, what was the animated film with like the lizard?
The one that Johnny Depp is the voice. What's it
Yeah,
called?
let me look this up quickly.
It's called Rango, isn't it?
Rango. Yeah, that sounds
Rango and Shane.
right. Roger Deakins
Django.
Rango. Yeah, I was gonna say Django Unchained, but I was like, no,
then I was like, wait,
that's
no, that
definitely
was the
not
other one.
animated. And it's not a comedy or a cutesy animation. No, it's very.
Oh, well.
I don't know. I'm not seeing anything come up, but anyway, yeah, I think it's interesting to see
Yeah.
artists and cinematographers come from onset to directing the work in CG. So
For sure.
yeah,
And I mean, when the tools get more physically accurate, that makes more and more sense. I mean, back in the days where you had to, if you had a light coming from here and you would have the light bounce off the concrete on the floor, you had to add an extra light to make the bounce light. And back then it was too technical, right? But now it's literally just reality that you're ray tracing reality. So
absolutely,
digital.
Yeah.
So makes so much more sense. I'm also looking forward to the real-time ray tracing. Then it will be totally like real life, but just with very lightweight lamps you can move around.
Yeah. Well, that's since we're at an hour, I would love to talk with you another time about the Unreal stuff that you're doing because it looks incredible, and yeah, I would love to get your take on that another time.
Yeah, of course.
But
we should.
That real time stuff is just insane. So
it's just a quick word on it. It's very fun to do, but you realize everything is fake. It's like you're taking a step forward in relation to speed, where you're taking 5 steps back in relation to realism, because then you're back having all the problems that they had 10 years ago.
Oh.
Where suddenly you have flickering. Suddenly you have everything is temporal. So if you just render, like you have to render a lot of frames to get it to work, and some effects, they kind of like appear and disappear gradually because it's temporal. It's not every frame that can be rendered by itself.
Sure.
But so, it's very interesting. Do
you find that you're doing like a lot of troubleshooting then that you're not doing with, for
sure,
ray trace?
I would say that if I had made that project in Redshift, then I could have rendered it. It would probably have taken 3 or 4 times as long to render, because even the render time is long in Unreal when you want high quality.
Really? Okay.
But I would have spent like half the time, if not less, because I ran into so many trouble, like just technical limitations, and suddenly the reflections, they started to flicker, or they disappeared, or they couldn't ray trace because of my displacement, or all these things. So, but it's very interesting. I think it's definitely something to check out for anybody who is interested in it. But there's just a lot of knowledge you have to obtain, a lot of issues you have to fix.
Yeah. That was like your first big project in Unreal, right?
Yeah, it's the first time I use Unreal.
Okay.
So
I imagine, second time around, you might be able to push through some of those issues a little bit more easily.
Yeah, for sure. But there is still some technical limitations that are just there that you won't have to bother with if you're ray tracing, fully ray tracing. But yeah. But we should definitely chat more about that another time.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, thanks for having me on. It was great to see your face and talk finally.
It was super fun. And what are you up to something new, cool stuff on your YouTube channel that's coming out? Or you mentioned the short film. Is there anything else people need to know about?
Yeah. Well, I don't know exactly what will be next on the channel. I am spending a lot of time developing this short film, because a lot of what I was learning this past year in terms of visual effects was ultimately to support a better story in a better story. And so, that film is is kind of, I'm hoping to show a lot of the behind the scenes and make tutorials from that. But that might not be finished till the end of the year or something like that. But until then, yeah, we'll see. I don't know what the next tutorial will be, but I've been learning some exciting things. That's all I can say.
Oh, that sounds very interesting. I'll definitely be looking out for it.
It's like about the most vague teaser I can give.
It's perfect.
No,
perfect.
It's a lot of the physically accurate side of things. So you'll love it.
So everybody who's team physically accurate will just totally go for it. Love it.
Yes, that's absolutely. Awesome. Everyone else, probably avoid it.
Probably avoid it.
CG Matter will avoid it. He'll keep doing his thing, but the rest of us might learn something. So
we will be happy knowing that it's done physically correct and the quote unquote right way.
Exactly. What about yourself? I saw this teaser that you released a while ago. Is that a project that's still coming along, or do you have a different personal project you're working on right now?
The teaser was actually it was a project I was doing with, it's the Lamborghini, I think. It was a project I was doing with HDR Light Studio, so it was like a teaser for their plugin for Blender.
Oh, I see. Okay.
So it was like a standalone thing. Then I was using it a bit afterwards because I was trying to figure out how to do caustics in a good way inside Blender. So I was using it for a few things to model, but that's kind of like a closed project by now.
Gotcha. Cool.
But right now I'm also working on a short film, like quite ambitious.
Nice.
But it's very, very early. But it's of course gonna be with cars. So what can you do?
Sure. Is it gonna be fully CG?
Yeah, it is gonna be fully CG. It's gonna be about rallying because it's like rallying is a big thing, or it was a big thing in Europe in the 80s and 90s, and when I was a kid we went to rallies and saw the cars, and it's like there's something very fascinating about that, and but now it's not really talked about so much, so I'm really curious about that. Hopefully it's going to be out in the near future within 5 years or something. I don't know, let's see.
Yeah. So, you'll be on the same timeline as the other greats in the industry, Ian Hubert and Colin Levy. That's funny. Yeah.
Let's see.
5 years would be awesome. I mean, finishing anything is an accomplishment. So
that is
as long as it takes. But that sounds cool. That sounds very cool. Can't wait to see that. Are you gonna post stuff while you make it, or you think you're just gonna wait till it's finished?
No, I'm very focused on this time, trying to build it while people are seeing it, because I think it's good to show the learning process, because it's kind of like what Ian Hubert did with his Dynamo Dream, showing every time he realized, oh, this is a good workflow for doing this. Okay, great. Record a video, throw it on YouTube, or post a story on Instagram. And I'm curious, is that also something you're thinking about doing for the short film, or is it more like live action-y, so it's not so much CG?
Yeah, I think it makes me nervous, honestly, to like show behind the scenes, because then you're kind of committing to making it, which I guess is a good way,
thing, right?
Yeah, exactly.
bit of good pressure.
Yeah, I probably should do it in that regard. But yeah, mine's short film is going to have a lot of live action. It'll have visual effects as well. But I didn't want to throw visual effects in there just for the purpose of visual effects. So because of that, most of it is just live action. Well, actually, I'd have to break it down. There's probably more visual effects. I think in my mind, I'm saying that there's not as much to make it seem more doable.
I get it.
Yeah. So yeah, well, I mean, I'm doing some visual effects tests for some of the different parts of the films. And so maybe those will be some tutorials coming up. I don't know if I'll necessarily, say outright that those are effects that are coming for this short film that I'm making and kind of market it that way. We'll see.
But that sounds really interesting. I'm looking forward to seeing some of that stuff, or maybe seeing some of that. I hope to be able to see some of that stuff.
Well, I'm glad we're kind of in this together, making these films, because it's not an easy process and it takes a while.
No,
How
exactly.
do you have any idea of how long yours is going to be roughly?
I'm aiming for 1.5 minutes. Probably gonna
Okay.
be 1 minute.
Nice.
But I think it's always like getting all the story in there that you want in the, or tell the story in the quickest way possible, right? For me,
Yep.
that's at least the thing I think will work. And what about
Yeah.
yours?
Right now it's around like 8 minutes.
Wow. Okay. So that's a lot of
Yeah.
story, I can imagine, that you can add to it.
Yeah. Yeah. I wish it were shorter, honestly. Um, but I've kind of looked at the script a lot and tried to trim it down as much as possible.
Yeah.
And so we'll see. We'll see what it winds up at the in the end. But at this point, I'm at a point where I could tweak the script endlessly.
Yeah.
And I kind of just want to move forward and start making the thing. Kind of that idea of like, do you put the effort in up front to make a tool, or do you just kind of move forward and do the work? I'm kind of at that point where I think I've done my due diligence to write this thing. And I kind of just, well, not only do I want to film it, but I just want to be done with the short film so I can move on to the next project, right? That's always the thing. Like, you're looking forward to the next project when you're in the throes of the complexities of whatever current project you're working on. So
that also like goes back to the what we were talking about at the beginning. I always feel like that. I'm like, okay, now I just need this stuff to get rendered, and then I can comp it. I don't care if it's gonna be a bit messed up now. I just want to get it out there. Like,
right.
Just don't want to work on it anymore.
Just finish it.
But then you realize afterwards that the stuff you enjoyed was the journey. So
Right. Yeah. And then you're left with a blank page again, and you wish you were back at the end of the last project.
Exactly. You're like, wait, now I have to make something better again this time. How do I do that?
Yep. Yeah. That is the process for sure.
That is the process. Sounds like it's great to be a CG artist.
Yeah. I don't know if we're really convincing many people if they haven't already taken the dive.
No,
but it is fun.
why
Trust
not?
us. It's fun.
Yeah. It gets fun, or it is fun all the way. So
it's a roller coaster. It's not all fun. It's not all bad. It's both at the same time a lot of the time. So
agreed.
Yeah.
But I'll be looking forward to that and be following you and seeing what comes out. And I will. Yeah. Where can people find you if they want to check you out, if they haven't seen your YouTube channel already?
Yeah. So my YouTube channel is InLightVFX, youtube.com/InLightVFX. And then I have a Patreon too that kind of supports that work. But yeah, that's basically it. I try to just focus on that. I have an Instagram and like Twitter. I think I have a Twitter. That's how much I use it. So yeah, this YouTube and Patreon.
Thanks again to Jacob for taking the time to chat. All links to Jacob's work, along with the things discussed in this episode, can be found in the description. If you want to support the podcast, please go to subscribe on your podcast platform of choice. By now, we're online on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and most other podcast sites. If you have any suggestions, feedback, or critique, feel free to throw me an email at daniel.v.jensen@gmail.com. Other than that, I just wish you a great day and see you in the next one.